Law enforcement in Santa Fe now trying to figure out what led to the high school shooting that left 10 people dead and more hurt. We've just learned that Santa Fe ISD has now canceled classes on Monday and Tuesday.
And the people who live in Santa Fe, they're trying to deal with a devastating loss. Our Japhanie Gray is live where a vigil is being held for the victims. Japhanie?
Yes, guys, I'm live at Texas First Bank. I'm going to keep my voice down because the vigil just began. But here at the vigil, they're giving Bibles and roses in remembrance of those who are somehow affected by that shooting that took place. Now I'm going to step outside so you can just see the hundreds of people here in support of the families that have lost. And some families even telling me that they have no idea where their loved ones are and that they're continuing to pray. But again, so many people here. The vigil has just began. It's right there at the center stage up there where we have several speakers. American Red Cross is out here passing out waters, but again, those people are out here in unity as a community during such a hard time. I'm going to send it back to you guys and bring you guys the latest as far as how this community comes out of this entire situation stronger.
All right, thank you, Japhanie. We are not even at the halfway point for 2018, and today's shooting is the 22nd shooting on a school campus this year. That's according to CNN. That includes any kind of firearm discharge on a school campus where someone was hurt, no matter the reason. We want to show you a map of all of these different incidents. Let's take a look at that now. The red dots on the map show all the cases where someone was hurt or killed. We're going to try to bring that to you. You can find it on ksat.com as well. There were 2 in Texas, including today's mass shooting in Santa Fe. The other happened in January at a high school in Italy. That's between Waco and Dallas. One student there reportedly shot by another student. That map, again, of all of those 22 incidents located on ksat.com. And here we are again, of course, reporting on another mass shooting following what happened in Parkland, Florida, following what happened in Sutherland Springs. And after that attack in Sutherland Springs, I talked with Mary Beth Fisk of the Ecumenical Center about secondary trauma, the secondary trauma of hearing and seeing the seemingly nonstop series of these tragic events and how to handle that trauma. That story has now been updated on our website at ksat.com. You can find it in the top story rotator right on the homepage, again, of our website.
This is a place where we're supposed to feel safe. This is somewhere we come most of the week. Nobody should have to go through this. Nobody should feel that pain. It hurts my heart to see this.
It's been happening everywhere. I've always kind of felt like eventually it was going to happen here too. So, I don't know. I wasn't surprised, I was just scared.
Your hearts go out for those students, and certainly school safety is something we all care about. We all want to happen. But how do we get there? That's part of the conversation that we're going to have with a group of 2 students from South Texas, as well as a gun instructor and the sheriff. Let's start with Jada Rogers. Jada, you are a junior at Stevens. You're also on the San Antonio Youth Commission. You did a survey of San Antonio students, and what surprised you about that?
So we gave them a list of topics to choose from. It was things like mental health, teen health, youth voice. But surprisingly, all the students really voted for what they felt was most pressing was gun violence and school safety. And so that was our biggest group at the Youth Summit that we held, and the students got to voice their concerns and their opinions on everything that's going on.
Did that surprise you?
Yes, it did.
Why? Did you think you were alone in that feeling?
I wouldn't say alone, but you wouldn't expect it from a group of kids, especially not from San Antonio, because we really haven't personally been struck here, and most kids usually don't really have feelings about something until it happens, like to them or someone close to them. We really thought that it was going to be more mental illness, because that's what most of these gun violence situations stem from, is a mistreated mental illness or mental illness that wasn't treated at all. What was it like being in class today when you got the news that there was a shooting in Texas? So there was a few conversations, but it kind of went back to normal. It was kind of like we had someone in one of my classes say that it was just another day in America. Some students voiced their opinions and concerns, but most kids found a way to carry on, because it's now becoming normal to not feel safe in your school, to hear of mass shootings and things like that. Clayton Anderson, you're a junior at Lee High School. You decided to do something after what happened in Parkland.
Yes.
You started your own blog. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's called Right for Our Lives. It's this campaign modeled after the Federalist Papers in a way for students and people who are very passionate about gun control and mental health and passing legislation to submit essays, and we publish them on our website, and yeah. So.
What was it like today for you?
It was shockingly normal. That's the truth, really. We have so many things like this happen, and it's starting to get really normal.
We titled it, go ahead, Myra.
You talk about it being shockingly normal, but does it affect you individually when you're walking through the halls or when you come into school? I mean, has it changed what you do as a student on a day-to-day basis? Oh,
yes, definitely. Every time you sit down in a classroom or you're in the cafeteria, you think about, what would I do if an active shooter were to come into the school? So I feel like that's a very common thought that goes through our heads.
Do you, Jada, Clayton, do you feel safe at school?
No.
Depends on the day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Johnny Castro Jr., you're a licensed instructor at a place to shoot. You've taught teachers how to be certified under DPS guidelines. You text me this morning. Your reaction?
Heartbroken, troubled, feeling helpless, feeling like we haven't done enough with some of the initiatives that are out there already in legislation. So just heavy heart.
Yeah. We're going to talk in a little bit about what you think the solutions are. Sheriff Salazar, I imagine in law enforcement, this is one of your nightmares.
Absolutely, it is. And knowing that, I reached out to, it was Harris County's Sheriff Ed Gonzalez this morning, and just made myself available to him. Myself, all my resources, just give us a call, let us know what you might need, and we'll send them to you, whether it be CSI folks or SWAT-type folks, whatever they might need. They're in for some long days ahead of them as this investigation unfolds, and I'm more than happy to provide them with whatever assistance they might need.
This is a conversation that we've had before. We're going to continue having it, especially right here. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back with our panel here. So many different perspectives talking about what happened, of course, today in Santa Fe. We want to get more of your opinions. Two students we have here with us, Jada and Clayton. I want to hear from you guys what you think the solution is here and what you think the solution isn't. You had some pretty good opinions about that.
Right. It's not just about gun control. I mean, a lot of times you guys are stereotyped as let's take all guns. You don't think that's necessarily the case?
No, I think that it goes deeper. Schools aren't safe in general, that we have so many exits and entries, off-campus activities, you know, students going for lunch and returning, visitors on campus every day. What the school districts are kind of missing, and what my experience has been, are we don't really have many safety measures. Lockdown procedures aren't really revisited and changed and innovated in any kind of way. And so I think, you know, we can push for gun reform, but that's kind of like a long-term thing. It's going to take some time. It's not just going to be tomorrow. But what we can do now is hit our schools. What technology can we start using? Are there different types of locks we can use? Is there some type of technology that'll close all the main access points into the classrooms and things like that?
Clayton?
Yeah, so I think that focusing on mental health is going to be one of the biggest solutions of this problem, because anyone has access to a gun, really. Like, it's very easy to obtain a firearm. So with that in mind, though, I also believe that we need to push legislation into the direction of banning high-powered assault weapons like the AR-15, because it's used in so many mass shootings.
Yeah.
And we've seen it done in the past. We've seen machine guns be banned. So if we're able to do the same thing and ban AR-15s, for instance, then I think that is also going to be a big solution.
Johnny, what do you think the solution is? Arming teachers, I know, is something that you train teachers.
You know, I never would have thought as a grandfather I'm condoning to arming teachers as my grandkids go to school. But like they said, they've gotten used to it being the norm. And so when I saw this morning the news that there was, again, the slaughter of students, it just shook me to the bone. DPS has a curriculum that was sanctioned, signed off, went into legislation that teaches or licenses teachers that have a certain skill set. We have veterans that are in the school district. We have retired police officers. We also have an FBI agent that we know that's in the school systems. Those type of people that already have a long background or history with a skill set can enter into this program, and that's something that, again, it's not going to change the face of the school because they're going to be inserted and not disturb the way that things are done in the school, such as changing into like a prison system per se.
Right.
And they'll be able to make at least a difference being there from one day to the next. You know, everything else that they're talking about is long-term, but in the short term, that's something that we can do. Just like that officer was there today, it did make a difference because seconds do count.
Sheriff Salazar, quickly, can you talk us through what your opinion on a solution is here from a law enforcement perspective?
I think all of the above. I don't know that necessarily arming teachers, let's just arm the teachers and be done with it, because it's a lot more than that. But as Jada was saying, look at technologies. How are we designing our schools? We're designing our homes to be burglar-proof. Why not design our schools to be active shooter-proof? And it does come down to electronics and technology sometimes.
We're going to continue this conversation on ksat.com at 7 o'clock. We're also going to touch on the mental health aspect. We're also going to talk to some parents who are concerned in this whole thing. That comes up at 7 o'clock tonight on ksat.com. We're going to live stream. You can ask questions on the KSAT Facebook page during that whole thing, too.
And coming up later on in this newscast, we're going to take a look at weather. We'll be right back with our coverage continuing here. Stay with us.
Around 7:30 this morning, a young man walks in to a high school and starts opening fire on classmates. It's a reason for us to have a discussion that a lot of people don't want to talk about. They either find themselves in the side of gun control or they find themselves in the sides of, getting rid of all guns. But that is just a surface discussion. We want to go much deeper into this discussion and maybe breaks down some stereotypes where we're at it.
It's a conversation we're all already having among our families, in our homes, among our friends. So we're going to continue this conversation with students, with gun instructor, with local law enforcement, all people with great perspectives to contribute to this conversation. We're going to continue that online starting here in just a few minutes. And
you can ask questions on KSAT's Facebook page, and we'd welcome you to do that. Welcome to this live edition of Spriester Sessions, Generation Under Fire. We continue our discussion that began in our 6 o'clock newscast, and our day began with a scene that is becoming all too familiar these days. This morning's incident at Santa Fe High School became the 22nd school shooting this year. To some, the solution is simple: get rid of guns. But this topic and its causes goes much deeper than that. It goes beyond firearms, as a matter of fact. We continue the topic that many don't want to face as Spriester Sessions, A Generation Under Fire, continues right now. 10 lives taken today in another tragic school shooting.
Nobody should have to go through this, and nobody should feel that pain. It hurts my heart to see this.
9 Santa Fe High School students, 1 teacher, 10 others injured. The shooter tonight in custody.
This has been going on too long in our country. Too many years, too many decades now. We grieve for the terrible loss of life and send our support and love to everyone affected by this absolutely horrific attack.
Tonight, a renewed call for action. Action to save the lives of young people who don't feel safe inside the walls of their own schools.
We need to do more than just pray for the victims and their families. It's time in Texas that we take action to step up and make sure this tragedy is never repeated ever again.
Welcome live to KSAT 12 studios. We continue the discussion on a generation under fire. And sadly, that's what it's become for a lot of our kids who go to school these days. As a matter of fact, just a few minutes ago, we talked to Jada and Clayton, and they talked about how today was almost like a normal day. And that's far from what we would like it to be. I'm joined by Myra Arthur to help us out in this discussion. We'd like you to join us as well. If you're watching this on a live stream, you can ask questions, and we'll ask the panelists as well. It's on KSAT's Facebook page, and we are streaming live right now.
For people who are just tuning into this conversation, let's start with the two students that were kind enough to join us tonight. Tell us a little bit about why this is normal. Why is this something that you all felt like was any other day?
You see it happen so often now. It's it could be a few weeks or a few months split apart. And now it's kind of that thing where you expected. It's like you're expecting to wake up to find out that another student has lost their life today. And it goes on for so long without anything really being done. And you kind of learn to cope and move on, as sad as that is.
And Clayton, for you, I want to ask you this question. This is something I always think about when one of these school shootings unfolds. What changes for you? I mean, how do you go about your daily life, go to school, do all the things that you're trying to achieve as a student, but know that this is a reality that students are dealing with?
Well, at this point, I think students generally just push back those thoughts and act like it doesn't really happen. It all really started, for people our age, it started with Sandy Hook. And then that was the really big shock factor. Since then, I believe that we're just a little more numb, I guess, to the violence that's happening, because it's all very real. It's crazy that stuff like that could happen at any time, but we're just able to suppress that and move on and act like everything's okay.
What do we term this generation under fire? You think that's an apt term?
Yes, I do. I really do, because generations before us, they haven't had the experience of going to school and thinking, wow, there's a huge possibility that someone could snap and my friends could be gone. But yeah, so generations before us really didn't have that fear, I believe.
Yeah. Johnny Castro Jr., licensed concealed carry instructor for both teachers and just regular concealed carry. When you hear these kids talking like this, and you know, they mentioned earlier, for those who didn't see our 6:30 portion of the 6 o'clock show, that it's not about guns. I mean, it's about mental health. It's about so many different things. When you hear them talking like this, and I know you expressed some frustration to me early today when the shooting happened, what do you think?
Well, it's a shame that we've come to this part where, like they keep saying, it's a norm. We push back those feelings. We just expect it to happen. As adults, we're trying to come up with solutions. That's something that's pretty difficult. Representing, again, arming teachers, I think there's a big misconception about exactly what the program is about. DPS took 2.5 years to develop it. The Senate, the House had to approve that. The state sanctioned it. Again, it's not arming every single teacher, and it's a few elite teachers that have a skill set, a background that can pass the curriculum that's been set up by the state.
Yeah. Jada, Clayton, what do you think about the idea of arming teachers?
It's kind of like a contradicting point, because while you feel safe, you know, knowing that, okay, there's a security guard, there's a teacher that has a gun, but it's then again that guns are what makes you feel unsafe in the first place. But I think that if you know that this is a person who has had a mental illness check, they've had a background check, and they've had, you know, this system that has made sure that they're at capacity to have this kind of weapon and this responsibility, then I think it's okay. And I like the idea of knowing that it's not every single teacher on my campus, but it's a very select few, because I think the perception when you hear let's arm teachers is that, okay, every teacher on campus is just gonna have a gun and they're gonna shoot when they feel
and not be trained. But that's far from what Johnny's talking about right now. Yeah, Clayton, what do you think?
Personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable with having a teacher on my campus having a firearm. And I feel like that's why we have the police at our school. We have, I think at my school, we have 4 permanent police officers. And even though that's shown to not solve the problem or stop the shootings, I don't think that having a teacher with a gun would do that either. Because during a hard lockdown, the main goal is to get all the kids inside a classroom, lock the door to make sure that no one gets in. And I believe that having teachers with guns wouldn't solve the problem, because this program that you've discussed, it's not having teachers pursue the shooter. It's more of a precautionary measure.
It may be a deterrent.
Well.
It's avoid, deny, and defend. They're not going to go out there to try to be the hero. But you have the avoiding and the denying, but you just don't have the defense. They have nothing to defend them once they're back up in a corner. And that's the critical part that we're missing here.
Yeah.
Jada, you brought up mental health. So I want to bring Sheriff Salazar into this conversation. We've covered the mental health unit within the sheriff's office. How important a component is that for you from a law enforcement perspective in this discussion?
It's absolutely vital. I mean, and probably even more so than the weapons discussion. Because somebody with a mental illness that goes untreated and undetected, unreported, you take away that person's gun, they're going to kill you with a knife. They're going to kill you with an axe or a truck full of fertilizer. They're going to find a way to kill you. So the guns necessarily aren't the problem there. It's a mental health issue. So as I mentioned earlier, it's an all of the above type issue that we need to look into. And yeah, mental health does play more than its part in that.
I guess this is a question I have for all four of you. Is there a frustration and a desperation that sets in at a certain point because we keep having these incidents and nothing is happening?
Yes.
I'll start with you, Sheriff.
Look, I mean, as a first responder, 25 years in law enforcement, I want to protect my community. And, you know, I'm hearing it when I'm watching, you know, Sheriff Ed Gonzalez on TV. I wasn't there I wasn't able to be there. And that's where we want to be, you know, as first responders. We want to be there protecting these kids. And to know that something like that happens in your community or could happen in your community, it does. It frustrates you. It's you know, we wish we could be all places at all times, and we just simply can't.
Yeah, Johnny?
Well, just like with Sheriff Salazar, what he said, we can't be at all places. And that's the part that I guess knowing about the program where we can have people that will be in all places, at least is something working to protect the children. Like I said, we have two components of what this young gentleman talked about.
Sure.
That's avoiding and denying. But the defending part, it's only been the teachers been able to just throw their bodies in front of the shooter or just hide and just wait till the shooter comes.
Yeah. Do you have frustration, though, that nothing's happened, you know, legislatively,
yes,
or more funding isn't, you know, necessarily being given to some of these mental health programs?
Talking with the sheriff, he said, I don't really know much about this program. The more that we share a little bit here on break, the more that he learns about it. It's like there's not enough information that's out there. So the frustration is people just hear we're arming teachers, and that's not what the program was set up for. It went through legislation. It was well put together. It took 2.5 years for DPS to finally get a curriculum. There's only been 23 instructors that have been certified to do this type of training. And it's a well thought out, well planned. It didn't happen overnight. It took years with alert and law enforcement and DPS and the legislators. So it was not something that was just thought of overnight and just implemented. So the frustration is that there's not enough information out there, and we need to, again, it's a rights issue. I think the teachers have a right to defend the children like they do, but unfortunately right now they don't have anything to defend other than their bodies.
Yeah.
Let's talk about schools themselves. You know, the actual physical location of a school. Is there more that, from the student's perspective, you think that we can be doing when it comes to security at schools, to school buildings, school entrances and exits? What do you all see on your campus every day that concerns you when it comes to actual security there?
Well, my school is set up it's a really weird formation. It's basically a maze. There's so many different ways that anyone from the public can just enter. And whether that be the front office or through sides in the buildings, because we have this outdoor configuration. I think we need to make our schools more secure by preventing people from just passing through at any time.
So metal detectors, clear backpacks, limited access. I mean, is that all things that you are okay with, or does some of that go too far?
That's a hard one. That's really a hard one. I think that we need to focus more on actually sealing the schools from the outside world and like preventing so many entrances.
Kind of like what the sheriff said. We make sure our homes are secure.
Yes.
Why aren't we doing the same thing with our schools. Jada, what do you think about this whole thing?
I agree with Clayton completely on, the amount of entrances and monitoring who's coming in and out of the schools. And, is there a way that we can provide more funding to put more people in the school, at those entrances to check, is there policies that every student needs to wear their student ID? Because, some school districts have already implemented those things, and they have kind of, they don't get rid of the problem, but they definitely make it a little more easy to identify. I think, the whole metal detector things, it's really sad that I would be okay with having to kind of take everything off and walk through a metal detector every morning if I knew that this was possibly preventing me from, not making it home. I think that, of course, government and gun reform is that main goal, but I think that our school districts and our city can offer more resources if it's initiatives like free mental health screenings and things like that. Self-defense classes, just things like that, ways for parents to know if something's happening mentally with their child, things for students, supports for students, because although these things aren't happening at our home, they're happening in close proximity to us. And I think that we always say gun violence and school safety, but it's also gun violence in communities, kids living in areas where shootings happening a lot and getting caught in the crossfire, or road rage incidents and things like that. So I feel like it goes deeper than schools.
Yeah. Before we switch out panels, we have three more panelists that I want to get to. Quick question for each of you, and I'll start with you, Jada. Do you think gun control is part of the solution?
It's part of the solution, but it's not the complete solution.
Clayton?
Yes, I do think gun control is a part of the solution. I think that if we're able to ban weapons like AR-15s that are most commonly used in school shootings.
Weren't used in today's, but I just want to point it out.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that we'll be able to prevent greater loss of life, but also I think that research is a huge part of this. We need to see how kids come to this point. We need to know why this is happening. So.
Yeah, from a mental health aspect you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Johnny?
I think that anybody that buys a gun should be able, or should have a background check on there. At a place to shoot, that's one thing that we stand for, is we make sure that those people that are buying a firearm are background checked. And I think that any loopholes that are there that allow them to, get around that is something that I would propose to try to close that, and I think that would aid. We're not against that at all, nor am I.
Yeah. Sheriff Salazar?
Well, I'm certainly not anti-gun. I'm anti-gun in the hands of the wrong folks, trying to keep them out. And so responsible gun ownership falls into that. My understanding is that those guns in the shooting today, this young man got them from
his father, I believe.
His father.
Yeah.
If your guns are stored in such a manner that a kid or anybody else can access them and commit something, yeah, there's something wrong with that. So I think it's a part of a bigger discussion.
I want to pose this question to you, Sheriff. We know that there were 2 resource officers that were already on campus, as they would be routinely at Santa Fe High School today. So do you think this doesn't really go to the prevention aspect, more the response, but could you see a time, or do you think it's a good idea for all campuses maybe to have a more robust district police force and have officers at every single campus?
Absolutely. I would like to see on the federal level some grants issued to each and every school district where they can either pay to hire more officers onto their full-time police force with the school district, or have some sort of a reserve program, or they can do overtime with their local sheriff's office or police department. There's ways of doing it. It's going to cost money, and I'd like to see some sort of grants cut loose for that.
Yeah, and Johnny, I know this is the second time that you've joined us with this conversation.
Right.
First time I know we felt like we really broke down some stereotypes. Feel the same way today?
Yes, definitely. The conversation continues to progress, and it progresses in the right area. We need to hear their concerns. We need to be, and again, there's a lot of common ground here. We're looking for the solutions, and again, it's not about anti-guns. It's about looking to the mental issues. It's looking accessibility in the buildings, and it's looking at ownership of the guns and responsibility. It goes in the right direction.
Great. Jada, Clayton, Johnny, Sheriff Salazar, thank you very much. While we switch out the panel, we've got a story from CNN that gives kind of a timeline of what happened this morning. So we're going to play a little bit of that as we switch out the panel and talk a little bit more about some of the things that you guys have touched on, including mental health.
Tonight, investigators are questioning 17-year-old Dimitrios Pagorchis, who they say planted explosives around Santa Fe High School in Texas before opening fire.
More shots fired, additional shots fired.
The first call came into 911 at 7:32 this morning, shortly after school had started.
Still have several more shots fired.
Students say Pagorchis, who attended Santa Fe High, seemed to have a plan. Fire alarms were pulled around the time the shooting happened.
I was in the history hallway, and as soon as we heard the alarms, everybody just, started leaving, following the same procedure as we did, because nobody thought it would be this. Nobody thought it was a shooting. Everybody just thought it was a, normal procedure, practice, fire drill.
Pagorchis appears to have set off explosives, which officials say they believe he built himself.
This is what IEDs throw them in a room. We might have live fight bombs.
We just hear so many 3 gunshots, loud explosions, and all the teachers are telling us to run, go, run.
As police began surrounding the school, inside they say he continued shooting, using a shotgun and a revolver taken from his father.
He's actually shooting. He's in the art room. We got shots fired right now, guys. We need all of you.
They heard 3 shots, and then Mr. Vaughn said to run, so everybody took off. I grabbed her. I ran to the tree line.
Officials say Pagorchis was injured at some point, though it is not clear how. He was eventually taken alive.
The shooter has information contained in journals on his computer and his cell phone that he said that not only did he want to commit the shooting, but he wanted to commit suicide after the shooting. As you probably know, he gave himself up and admitted at the time that he didn't have the courage.
Officers cleared the building, evacuating students and searching some.
Me and my friend Ryan Calvert ran to the forest so we could get shelter, and that's when I called my mom.
In addition to the shooter, police say they are holding a possible accomplice, an 18-year-old fellow student. Tonight, investigators say they are focused on tracking down any other explosive devices the shooter may have planted at and near the scene. They say they have already found at least 1 Molotov cocktail as well as a carbon dioxide device. Police now have warrants to search 2 nearby homes as well as the shooter's car, but are proceeding carefully because of concerns about other bombs.
Community members should be on the lookout for any suspicious items and anything that looks out of place. Do not touch any items that look out of place.
Tonight, students and parents in Santa Fe are describing moments of terror and confusion.
If you would have heard what I heard this morning, the fear in my loved one's voice because of my son being in that classroom.
And we continue the conversation now with a new set of panelists. So we're going to talk on a lot of the things we still discussed and more. I want to introduce our panel now. Marcus Sampson is a senior.
Yes.
At Lee High School, about to graduate. I almost called you a junior. I didn't want to shortchange you there, Marcus.
Not again.
So I appreciate you being here. Mark Stolze is with the Clubhouse of San Antonio. I think of Clubhouse as a great name for it. I mean, it's really a place where those who've been diagnosed with mental illness can come for community, for support, for hope. Is that an apt way to describe it?
I'd say so, yes.
Yeah, and Becca DeFelice, who is with Moms Demand Action for
For Gun Sense in America.
For Gun Sense in America. I knew I was going to mess up that. Moms Demand Action is the shortened way I put it. Thank you all 3 for being here.
Yeah, you were all here because you have so many different perspectives at your stages in life, the organizations you're involved with. Mark, I want to start with you because mental health always seems to be part of this conversation, but I feel like a lot of times people don't know where to start with that. Where do you start when addressing mental health as part of the solution here?
Well, so the way I think about it is we tend to look at this issue in very black and white terms. It's either this or it's this. It's either too many guns or it's lack of mental health services. It's a very complicated issue. But the reality is when we blame mental illness for things like this, we keep people from getting the help that they need to treat their mental illness.
It's stigmatizing.
It is, and the reality is statistics show that about 5% of gun violence is committed by people with mental illness. Research has shown, they looked at mass shootings going all the way back to 1966, and studies showed that only 14% of those shooters, 1 in 7, had any sign of any mental illness. So the idea that there's automatically a correlation between mental illness and violence is just not true.
And I want to repeat what you said. 2/3 of people who are diagnosed with mental illness never seek help or didn't seek help.
Correct.
Because they didn't want to be stigmatized as having a mental illness.
Right. Because of the myths that are out there. I've worked with thousands of people with mental illness over the last 15 years. We've had thousands of people in our doors. Never have we had an incident of violence. Never have I felt unsafe. And perpetuating this myth keeps people from seeking the treatment that they need.
Are mental health programs getting enough money?
Oh, no. That's another show.
Yeah, yeah.
There've been some improvements. The legislature came through with additional funding for mental health, I guess about 4 years ago, and didn't cut those services last session. But we still have a long way to go when you look at us compared to other states.
Is that part of the solution?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Isolation is the worst thing for a person with mental illness. So when you don't have social interaction, when you don't have opportunities to get help, and you isolate at home, that's when symptoms become worse. So isolation is a big part of the problem.
Marcus, where were you when you heard what happened today?
In my car on the way to school this morning, yes. I heard it on the news, NPR.
What was your reaction?
Not again. I mean, it's just, I wasn't surprised. I was sad to hear that it happened, but I wasn't thrown off. My day wasn't too different. I had a couple conversations about it, but it wasn't like a shift in my day. It was the same that happened, the same feelings that came when it happened last time.
So those conversations, for this to be another day, another shooting, but the conversations you did have, what were those about?
They were actually pretty short. It was like, hey, did you hear what happened in Florida? Yeah, that sucks. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
or here, did you hear what happened in Houston? Yeah, all right. It's just like it's more of like an information gathering of like what happened and then moving on, because we can't stop our day about it anymore. Like, it's not something that rocks our world.
How do you feel about that?
Normalizing something as insane and as crazy as someone with a gun on your school is scary. It's scary that we can, as a society and as a people, like, have something this big and this crazy happen and it just be a part of our day. If this happened in any other country, I'm not going to say any other country, but if this happened in most of the countries around the world, it would be a bigger deal. It wouldn't be just another thing that happened in the US of A.
Yeah.
You know, I've actually found myself having a thought that it's been a while since we've had one of these mass shootings. You know, sometimes that happens from one to the next, and then here we are discussing this latest one, and it takes me aback, and I'm sure a lot of people, that's how students are feeling about it, that this is the new normal. Becca, for you, your organization, as much about awareness as action, it is in your name. So what do you think is the solution here?
I mean, honestly, the solution is, it's not a one-stop problem. It's not something where we can just push one magic button and have everything magically come together. So we really believe that legislatively, we need to see change. Our lawmakers have, for decades now, sat back while our children are being slaughtered in school. I was a high school senior when Columbine happened, and I remember that it was so stunning, and it dominated the news. And there was all of this talk about, how did this happen? How can we prevent this from happening again? And now I have a child in elementary school, and I am looking at this happening over and over and over again. And so to me, that says that our lawmakers, they don't really care that much about stopping this. And so it's time for us to vote in new representation. If the lawmakers that we have now are not going to act, especially here in Texas, where we're looking at the private sale and the gifting of firearms without a background check, that's a loophole that can get bipartisan support in being closed. We have the open carry of long arms without a license. We don't have red flag laws. And these are simple, common sense solutions that our legislature, frankly, just hasn't acted on. If anything, what we're looking at session after session is an attempt to make our gun laws even more lax, where we're talking about things like permitless carry, where they would no longer require licensing or training to concealed carry a handgun.
As a mother, when you hear Marcus or Clayton or Jada talk about how today was just another day, how does that hit you?
I mean, it breaks my heart, because the reality is our students, like you and my child, we should not feel grateful for surviving a day at school.
I agree.
It should not be a battleground.
Right.
You are there to get an education. You should be safe. But the reality is that it's not just schools. It's movie theaters. It's churches. It's malls. So when we talk about things like school safety and hardening our schools or arming teachers, those are stopgap measures. So we make our schools into fortresses and nobody can penetrate them. Are we saying that our children can't go to church now? They can't go to the mall? They can't go to dinner? This is a systemic problem that we are looking at as a country. I mean, we had another mass shooting earlier this week in Texas,
right,
and it fell off the news. It was barely even a blip. And those are things that, like the extreme risk protection orders, those are things that could have been prevented but weren't.
Talk about your organization that you're part of. I know some of the members of Moms Demand Action, and a lot of them are gun owners.
That's correct.
So, and I even know one of your leaders went to the NRA convention, you know, a couple of weeks ago. I mean, this is not something where you're necessarily saying it's an us against them type thing.
It really isn't. Our organization absolutely is made up of responsible gun owners and moms and veterans and educators. It's really anyone who has a vested interest in keeping our communities safer. And a big part of that is responsible gun ownership. So this is not a pro-gun, anti-gun conversation. This is a conversation about how can we be safer, what common sense solutions can we find together as a community and work towards.
Are we making progress?
I believe that we are. And I know that it doesn't feel like that on a day like today. On a day when you hug your kid extra, extra tight when they get off the bus because you're so grateful that they came home to you. But when you look at things state by state, you're seeing things like Governor Scott in Florida passing sweeping gun regulations. That was a bold move for an NRA A-rated governor and a Republican governor at that. So we are seeing state by state that common sense measures are being passed. People are more aware. This conversation is happening more. And communities are getting to be more open with saying, we do have a problem and what can we do? So just that willingness is a big move forward.
Do you think that, and maybe this is, I know Mark touched on this a little bit. You know, a lot of people say we live in our silos of information, you know, where I don't want, you know, I want this, I want that. And so what I really want to do with this conversation, if we do nothing else, is just have a conversation. Because I think there's so many people that don't want to talk about sensible gun laws or mental health or what our kids are doing in school and how they're feeling and how this is becoming normalized. How do we go about that? Do you feel like sometimes when you voice your opinions on gun violence that you're kind of just, you know, oh yeah, well, that's the way he feels, like stereotypes?
Right. Yeah. When people look at me and they see the person that I am with my hair and they think, right, okay, he's fighting for the same liberal agenda, blah, 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 blah. But when our entire school comes together, not entire school, when a lot of our kids from our school come together, all genders, all races, all ethnicities, they all come together and sit down on the field for 17 minutes. And instead of us all getting in trouble and being suspended, we all are surrounded by administrators and teachers who are there to support us and make sure we're safe, instead of coming in with a firm hand and saying, this is, stop.
Right,
Yeah.
suspension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of that, we are listened to, maybe, and we draw attention to things that we want to draw attention to. I think it's really awesome that we do get heard.
And from an adult perspective, what's it been like for you guys to watch what's happened since Parkland, to see students walk out of their classrooms, to see students march in Washington? I mean, this is something that we haven't really seen before. We're talking about teenagers that are saying enough is enough, and they're coming out by the hundreds across the country. From an adult perspective, what's that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is heartbreaking. And I think, you know, as I said earlier, it's a complex issue. And I'm not denying that mental illness sometimes plays a role. But, you know, whether you're a liberal or a conservative, a Democrat or a Republican, it's hard to argue with the reality that there are too many guns and they're too easy to get. I was down by Travis Park when they were, you know, going to take the statue down. They had those guys out there with the big semi-automatic guns. It's insane that we live in a country where that's happening. And that's, to me, that's not a political view. That's just sanity.
Yeah. Becca?
For me, I think it's inspired all of the moms that have been working on this issue for a number of years now. It's inspiring to see the kids come forward and say that they're not going to stand by anymore. They're not going to allow themselves to feel like this at school. But at the same time, as a parent and as an adult who has been of voting age for an unspecified number of years, it does make me feel like I've failed. I think that as a generation, we've failed these children, that they are now having to advocate for their own safety at school. So anything that I can do to rectify that, I'm going to do. So, I mean, all of you have inspired everyone in the generation above you and the generation above that to keep going and to keep moving this forward and to keep having this conversation.
I think that was our spark. Parkland, Florida was our spark. With every change or civil rights movement, whether it's Rosa Parks not giving up her seat or anything, like there's always a spark that inspires this group of people to move and say enough is enough, and enough is enough.
Mark, what can be done from a mental health aspect when we talk about this? I mean, we talked about, you know, with some of the students about ways they feel like they could be safer in school. How do we get past the stigma of mental health illness? I mean, how do we get to a place where it's safer for somebody to ask for help? Because a lot of times it takes more courage and strength to ask for help than to remain in the shadows.
Right. Being willing to talk about it. You know, we still, even today, we believe that somehow a mental illness is a character disorder, or it's something that you developed because you're a bad person, instead of an illness like it is with any other illness. And we need to be able to talk openly and freely about it. And the more that we do that, the more willing people are to seek help, just like they would for any other illness.
Yeah. What are some of the resources out there if somebody's watching this and they want to get help themselves or help for someone they know?
So there are resources, and Bexar County is actually a trendsetter in improving mental health services in Texas. Our Center for Healthcare Services, our organization, San Antonio Clubhouse. I mean, I'm always willing to talk about the clubhouse.
Yeah.
And the services that we provide in helping people that, you know, when I was talking earlier about knowing thousands of people over the years and never having an incident of violence, I'm talking about people coming out of hospitals, coming out of jails, coming out of shelters, And if people can get the help they need and they can form relationships, which is a big part of what we're about, they get better. And that's what we need to do. We need to get mental illness out of the closet, so to speak, and talk about it and treat it like the illness it is.
That's just one component, like we've all talked about, of hopefully what will be a larger solution. But I think the conversation, being able to have one, is the place we all have to start.
Yeah, being able to have one and have a civil conversation is something that I very much wanted to accomplish. So I appreciate all of you being here and our guests from earlier. I appreciate all the people who are watching at home, either on ksat.com or through Facebook Live. I really appreciate you being part of this conversation and part of this very special edition of Spriester Sessions. We're going to wrap it up for tonight. And of course, if you know somebody who you think would benefit from watching this, it will live on ksat.com. You can tweet it out, Facebook it out, Instagram it, whatever that I may not know about. You can send it out and share it and continue the conversation, because if nothing else is accomplished, maybe people will start talking about this.
Yeah, hopefully it helps people spark their own conversations in their own homes and with their own friends and family. Thanks so much for joining us.